would like to welcome you all at this particular class that we are trying to study and work together on the basis of tantric teachings of Buddhism. And this is an extremely ambitious project that we are doing, that some of you might have no background, or some of you have some background to understand Tantra. But however, that it is possible that we could work together in this particular subject. The basic notion of a Tantra, that what we're going to study and what we're going to work on, is largely based on the practice of meditation, according to Buddhist tradition, that it is necessary to have some experience of it. Otherwise we are at lost. At the same time, having experienced the practice of meditation, that there should be some kind of understanding, theoretical understanding at least, of Tantra. That's what we are doing at this point. And we are viewing the area that we might arrive at some point one day. At the same time, we try to understand that area we might be in one day. So the subject matter that we're going to discuss and deal with is a purely hypothetical ground. Maybe with some personal experience that you might have felt in some part of your life. But still, it is a very hypothetical situation. And that might have some experiential connections, quite possible. But however, that hopefully you'll be able to take this particular course personally, rather than entirely based on a theoretical experience alone. There are some people in the tantric in nature, by nature, that have some experience already. It is worthwhile to clarify some problems that you've faced or some misunderstandings that you've experienced, or mishandling one's energy and so forth is need to be corrected. Fundamentally, that Tantric Buddhism came about when there was complete understanding and comprehension of Hinayana Buddhism as well as Vajrayana Buddhism. The teachings of Tantra came about. That in order to understand the basic grounds of Tantra, which means continuity, Tantra, or in Tibetan, Gyut, which means continuity, that there is a continual thread that is running through. In terms of personal experience to the teachings that you are committed to. So this thread begins from somewhere, ordinarily speaking. If you have a continuity, where you begin the continuity. But at this point, according to the Buddhist norm, that we could say that this thread had never begun. And therefore, there is continuity. In fact, such thread doesn't exist. And it's a continual one at the same time, however. That is to say that the basis of this particular experience is largely founded on who is practicing Tantra. Rather than what is Tantra. We are, at this point anyway, not in a position or apt to discuss what is Tantra. But we have to go back and right at the beginning to find out who is perceiving Tantra, who is a Tantrika, who is a Tantric practitioner. That brings us a lot of questions, how far we can go back. Do we have any chance to hear about Tantra at all? Or are we just purely trying to find out who's Tantrika? Well, that seems to be, depends on us. But as far as Tantrika or Tantric practitioner is concerned, that we couldn't find what this is, who it is, which is going back and back and back to the beginning of the Buddhist tradition, what's known as Hinayana. From that point of view, Hinayana is a Tantra. One of the inspiring glimpses or experiences that Hinayana practitioners have experienced is that of the absence of self. Which is equal to the absence of a God. When there is no individual being, personality, to perceive external entity of anything at all, then the point is that that particular situation becomes open, rather than have a conceptualized divine being, or for that matter, traditionally known as Big Brother. So we are examining what this is. Who are we? Who it is. According to the Tantric observation, so to speak, that we find ourselves are nobody. Rather non-body. How is it possible I have a name, I have a body, I eat, I sleep, I lead life, I wear clothes? And that seems to be precisely the point of that we misunderstood ourselves, our non-existent self. That we approach ourselves on the basis of that we eat, we sleep, we exist, we have a name, therefore presume there is something must be happening. That's the common misunderstanding that took place all the time, long time ago and also recently at the same time, constantly. Every one moment is a problem of that. That we are not ourselves because we have a name. How do we know? If you don't use a reference point that I'm called so and so by name, and I wear clothes, I eat, I sleep, there's a big gap somewhere. Usually the logic goes that we don't exist because of something else. You could say, I don't exist because I'm penniless. But still you have a penny to be less of. So that isn't quite good logic. Certain hysteria of trying to non-exist to ourselves had brought, in American culture particularly, if I was drafted in the army, I don't exist because I burned my birth certificate, my draft card, and hopefully nobody will find me. But still, somebody fights for this particular thing exist. The birth certificate-lessness is individuality, and the draft card-lessness is also an individual being who had deliberately tried to burn his draft card and birth certificate and driver's license, whatever you have. But there's some kind of record of that still exists. Then we end up by blowing the office buildings in Washington or wherever that your draft cards and your birth certificates were installed. That created enormous commotion. You become yourself in the newspaper headlines and all kinds of things. You become more spectacular than you're trying to non-exist. We end up in the problem. In fact, the question of non-existence here is not a question of trying to destroy a relative reference point. If you try and destroy, we are also in the same problem. But the question is not using any reference point at all, none whatsoever. And then can we find ourselves? Not looking at ourselves, not finding out whether we exist or not, but just simply looking at ourselves directly without any reference point, any concept or even reference point, or even concept of not using reference point either, but just simply directly looking at ourselves, even without looking. Well, that may be very demanding. But let be so. Let us find the core of the problem, the heart of the matter. Well, probably we find ourselves in the situation that not knowing exactly what to do, completely lost. And we begin to find that this is a very weird practice, what we're trying to do. I even can't begin. How can I do anything? Well, maybe that is some kind of small portion of a beginning at the beginning. That relating with one's stupidity, ignorance as a beginning point, not knowing how to deal with oneself without using reference point, is getting closer somewhere to the truth, so to speak. But at the same time, we haven't found the root of the reality, so to speak, if there is at all, which we don't know at this point. We cannot find the beginning of the tantric thread unless we come to the conclusion that we don't exist. That's possible. That's the only point. That's the important point. And one of the problems that we face is that we try to logically work out that we don't exist because something doesn't exist. Something does exist, therefore we don't exist. It had to be experiential. Also, it had to be beyond stupidity, beyond the confusion, obviously. That confusion that what we are talking about at this point is not knowing how to begin. We begin to find there is the beginninglessness, and we feel that is endless as well at the same time. So we are getting somewhere, but still we are rather stupid. We find ourselves being jellyfish, robot. And there's no discovery at all, but the whole thing seems to be rather flat. The only way to find a way out of that or way into that is that it is necessary, according to Tantric tradition, is there should be some sense of humor with this whole thing. That we try to find ourselves and not able to finding ourselves, and we begin to feel enormously flat and heavy and in the way somewhere. And begin to find that something is being nuisance, not knowing and exactly where to put your finger on, but still there is something is nuisance somewhere that is not actually happening. And if one takes the viewpoint of humor on this particular point, and then you begin to find that even the flatness, even the uninspiring and the solidness and the confusing quality is actually dancing at the same time, constantly, all the time. So there seems to be a need to develop some sense of excitement and a dance, rather than that there is something is taking place and you would like to make it feel better. When you begin to find that dance is taking place with your humor, that the current or apparent stupidity is somewhat uplifted, but still we do not know whether we just look at ourselves humorously, but still the stupidity is heavier all the time. Or we might be able to cure ourselves, we have cured ourselves, so therefore there's something taking place which is uncertain, is still uncertain, completely confused, and very ambiguous. Then we begin to find that the ambiguity is question. According to the Tantric tradition, it is called the discovering the seed syllable. Is the discovering the ambiguity. The reason why it is called a seed syllable is because uncertainty becomes a big issue rather than a source of problem. So you begin your point of view from uncertainty according to Tantric tradition. And we begin to find ourselves that we don't exist. Finally, completely, that it is a certain ambiguity is a source of confusion and a source of humor at the same time. So therefore, the discovery of non-existence comes from energy and stuff or thingness. And the thingness doesn't prove the existence of energy. Energy doesn't prove the existence of thingness. So we begin to find ourselves at lost in the fashion of freedom rather than the fashion of confusion at this point. This chaos we are talking about, and this humor we are talking about, this ambiguity we are talking about, is personal experience rather than analytical experience. That we begin to realize that we don't exist actually. We don't exist because of our existence. That is the punchline, so to speak. The world exists because we don't exist. We don't exist, therefore the world exists. There's enormous joke behind the whole thing. Big joke. You might say, who's playing the joke on us? Well, it's difficult to say since we do not know who it is at all, or even we don't have a question mark to formulate end of our sentence, that we are uncertain. And maybe that is our purpose of studying Tantra, is trying to find out who is questionnaire, who set up this all together, if any, if at all. To realize non-existence, understand non-existence, experience non-existence, is seems to be the beginner's point of view. There's more to come. But I think it is very important for us to understand and realize that sight, smell, colors, emotions, formlessness and formness are all expressions of no beginning, non-existence. Personal experience rather than metaphysical, philosophical experience. And that seems to be one of the important points that we have to discuss, we have to get into properly. There's more to come. And I think at this point what I'm trying to do here is you might be highly frustrated or confused or maybe quite possibly pissed off. But we've got to do this, I'm afraid, that in order to become a good student, good listener, good audience, that you have to go through this. Otherwise, what we might be doing is completely fruitless. And it is not a particularly big demand, it's just a matter of attitude and concept that we are used to having a lot of help, that when we go and listen to a speaker, read a book, that book expected to be comprehensive, grammatical, and good literature, and listen to a speaker, that you expect a speaker would sell his product to you. You don't have to do anything very much but pay your cents worth. And somehow it doesn't quite work when we particularly talk about the Vajrayana teaching, which is regarded as extremely sacred and inaccessible. And also a lot of people in the past, generations after generations, have put a lot of energy and effort into this. We can't afford to make this into purely merchandise in the supermarket. So I hope you understand this. And maybe we should have a discussion at this point, if you have anything to ask at all.
I'd like to know if there's a list of which books we should read for which weeks. There was last
There's
term.
what?
There's a list of books for the course, and
yeah.
I haven't seen anything saying which go with which lectures like there was last term. And I was wondering if there is such a list.
Is there a book list? Did you ask that?
Saying which books to read which weeks, so that the books go with the material you discuss.
Well, we left it open at this point. I think that the style of this particular course seemed to be slightly different than that of the previous one.
Okay. Thank you.
And hopefully you'll be able to read it, all of them, sometime or other.
The way you described anatta as the approach to the beginning of the tantric path seems to me to be very closely related to the shunyata concept, namely that concepts themselves, as we have to formulate through our cerebral apparatus, are of no help of realizing our existence or our being. Now, is anatta and shunyata very closely related?
Yes. I think actually we're saying the same thing at this level. Good luck, sir.
This may sound a little slightly oddball, but the point is this: we live in a country where we're brought up with habits, and we have an education system, and we go along with the system, and we get molded, and then there's a youth comes along, which every couple of seasons, there is youth. Then they say, well, there's something wrong with this system. We can't put our finger on the system. Then we can say they're right or wrong, and then we still go on with our system that you're out to make a buck, and you don't care how you make a buck, and that is the thing, the almighty buck. And then it just doesn't seem to work out. Now it comes a direct clash that it comes along that youth says, we know something is wrong, and we can't put our finger on it. Then it comes along that we hear these kind of teachings. Some of us become attracted to it. Now the question is this: how can you have these kind of teachings and make them work? Make them work, because I personally feel that there is no other way. But how can we just take these teachings, and how can you go American style?
I don't know exactly what the American style is exactly, but on the other hand, I think I could feel it where you put it out. But the question is that one of the problems or misunderstandings that we have here is how. That I would like to get prescription. I have insomnia. How can I fall asleep? You say that to your doctor, and the doctor does it in American style by saying, take those pills, then you have no problem. Maybe I'm putting American style in a different perspective, which I particularly not meant to as such. But maybe that is the case. In many cases, Americanization is concerned. The question here is not so much about how, but just do it. And methodology becomes hang-up problem. We have all kinds of bureaucratic systems have developed already, and somehow they don't really function, as true and obvious and a compassionate way to handle our state of being. So maybe the question is that we're not talking about not how to handle the whole thing in terms of how can do it, but one got to do it.
Rinpoche, would you be so kind to elaborate on the difference, if there is any, between the Hinayana and
Difference what?
the Hinayana and that which you spoke of today?
At this point, there's none. At this point. Let's see later what else come up.
I understood you to say earlier this evening that some people are tantric by nature. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Do I what?
I understood you to say that some people are tantric by nature. Could you clarify that?
Enchanted by nature?
No, tantric by
Oh,
nature is what I
tantric.
understood you to say. Maybe
That's
that's the
better.
same.
Well, I think it's pretty much what we have here as far as individuals, collections of individuals concerned. It's there's inspiration in the people's development that there is some reality is taking place in the true sense, that experiences of energy becomes relevant to them, that they feel maybe threatened by such energy, or maybe they feel lack of energy, but still that there is a sense of personal interest in the world of sensual, the world of visual, audio world, whatever it may be. There's some interest in how things work and how things are perceived to you. There's a sense of enormous interest, which you seem to be tantric by nature, is that interest in the perceptions. And maybe that's the problem of inspired tantrikas, future tantrikas maybe, that they are too fascinated by world of sound, world of smell, world of visual, world, whatever may be, that there is some sense of lackness, although they're inspired, but at the same time there is possibility that they don't have enough grasp of them, which might present a problem of understanding true Tantra. But still, they could be regarded as born in Tantric family in the form of fetus. At this point.
if you find you're not particularly fascinated by sounds or sights or colors, that the question of who's the experiencer seems to be more relevant than that fascination. Would that mean that you're not particularly tantric by nature?
I would say that's more concerned with like Mahayanist by nature, Bodhisattva by nature. Because you concern yourself, your own development at the same time.
You use the word inaccessible in referring to Vajrayana teachings, and what was the implication there?
Inaccessible?
Inaccessible, I think you used that word.
Well, it's very rare. And therefore you probably don't get it. Like if you order steak tartare, very few people order such a dish, and usually somebody order hamburger, hot dog. And steak tartare is very rare. Sorry about that. Friends, probably we should adjourn our meeting tonight. I have no idea, is there any other announcement need to be made, anything like that? Okay, well then we break. Good night.